not turn anyone away. If we had the minor come in with her best friend and they skipped school and they are here and this is their situation, if we can get paid for the procedure, we overlooked everything.
Welcome to Straight Talk on Life Issues. I'm Victor Nieves, president of Life Issues Institute. Did you know that in many cases, a minor can get a secret abortion without her parents' knowledge? This is possible in part due to abortion facilities like Planned Parenthood often looking the other way when an unaccompanied minor comes in, even without identification. To them, the checks all cash the same. Every parent has a right to know if their child's safety and well-being are being compromised. No parent should have to live through the nightmare of witnessing their child get a secret abortion. Today we're joined by Eileen Roberts, president of Parents for Life. She's a voice for parents and educates the public on the need for policies that protect minors and the rights of their parents. We're also joined by Noemi Padilla. She worked at Tampa Women's Health for 4 years as a licensed practical nurse manager. Noemi now serves as And Then There Were None's client support specialist. Eileen and Noemi, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, Eileen, let's start with you. As we talk about this very important subject of parental rights, there's probably no one better than you to share your story about the importance of parents being able to have the final say and being informed and educated and the importance of legislation around that. Share with us your story.
So when my 14-year-old daughter became severely depressed, my husband and I was searching for answers. We thought that perhaps her boyfriend had introduced her to drugs, so we searched her room. But instead of finding drugs, we found a questionnaire from the abortion clinic that she didn't mail back. So we confronted her about her depression, and she agreed that she needed some kind of mental health assistance. So we brought her to that facility, and she was admitted for 7 weeks. When you're admitted to a mental health facility, you're isolated from your family for about a week so they can do input and evaluations. So that was pretty sad. But instead of a week, I got a call the next day by the nurse who was caring for my daughter. And she said, well, we need you to come to the hospital because your daughter needs follow-up surgery to repair the damage done by the abortionist. So, of course, I drove 2 hours to the facility, signed a consent form. She came through that surgery well. I got in the car, came home, and really was in shock. I mean, I didn't process what was going on, but when I got home the next day and my 2 other children went to school, I was laying in my bed, actually depressed. And at the time, our radio station had news, and this is the headline that day. The Virginia General Assembly just killed a bill that would require at least one parent to be notified if a minor was seeking an abortion. So I jumped out of bed. I called National Right to Life. I said, hey, I've got a story. This is ridiculous. What can I do? So I became involved in Advocate for Parents since 1987, and it's been a real encouragement to many parents who have gone through the same thing. In addition to that story was, we were responsible, my husband and I were responsible for the follow-up costs of the mental health and physical surgery in the amount of $27,000. So as I speak about this issue, legislators, I tell them, you're not responsible afterwards. The parents are. So we should have a right to know.
Wow. And so the first time that you found out your 14-year-old daughter had had a secret abortion was when the facility called you. The abortionist didn't reach out to you. There was no communication prior to that?
Correct. We found out from the questionnaire because we didn't know why she was depressed. She didn't tell us why until we found out why.
And how many other parents do you think are out there who don't know that their child had a secret abortion?
I really don't have any numbers, but I think it's more common than not. And of course, in Virginia, we just found someone came forward, a teacher in Northern Virginia, who is a whistleblower now, saying that schools, this particular high school in Northern Virginia, has taken girls to clinics without telling parents. So it's bigger than we thought. Parents for Life have always thought, and me personally, that this was going on because the story of my daughter was she skipped school that day and she said she was driven by an adult friend. We don't know if that was a social worker from school or not. There's always question marks. And unfortunately, most women and young girls and now who are adults don't want to talk about the past. So we still have unanswered questions.
You mentioned the impact that had on you. Laying in bed, you were depressed. This took a toll on your mental health, as anybody could imagine, for you, a parent, to find out this information. For one, just to know that your child is suffering. But for two, to know that this great evil took place and you could have protected potentially. If you would have been involved, had there been legislation that would say that they can't do that. They can't give a 14-year-old an abortion. Take us back to that moment when you first found out and what that did to you.
Well, again, it made me very sad. It made me angry as well. I wanted to find out who the people were, where this clinic was, etc. But I did take pause because the most important issue for me at that point was not my own depression, but my daughter's and the help that she needed to get well.
And at that time, were you aware that a minor could go and get this procedure without the involvement of their parent?
Well, yes, I was, because I was always pro-life and followed National Right to Life and what they were all doing. But I didn't realize that Virginia didn't have a parental consent or notification law. So it was surprising.
And in your experience, obviously having spoken to many people about this, surely met other parents who have experienced similar, a lot of people are going to be wondering, a simple question, but it's pretty deep, as far as why do you think it is that oftentimes children will not want to share that with their parents?
Well, the biggest thing they say is they're afraid or they don't want to disappoint their parents. I mean, it sounds very simple. Again, there are some parents, I'm not naive to know that there are some abusive parents and the children are afraid, but that's not the majority of parents. Most parents, I say 99% of parents, do love their children and only want the best interest for them. But yeah, they're usually what we hear is they're scared. They don't want to disappoint their parents. They're led by their boyfriend. They're convinced that it'll be easy. So it's all the lies that our children are told.
Noemi, as we talk about the importance of parental rights, parental consent when it comes to abortion, I think it's important that we start off with your story, if you'd share it with us.
Oh, my story, yes. So, I moved to Tampa in 2009. I am a 9/11 survivor, and lots of bad stuff happened to me up until then. Came to Tampa looking for a reprieve and to do something a little bit different. Obviously, I've been a nurse for many, many years. I had an abortion when I was 17 years old in New York, and it was an illegal abortion, not that I cared at that moment. And that led me to think, well, eventually someday I'd like to give back to that industry, right? To that component of medicine. And back then I thought it was still medicine. And I moved to Tampa, different jobs, different things, but there was an abortion clinic literally 5 minutes away from where I was living. And so that was always going to be my, my go-to job because it's 5 minutes away. I can just walk on a really bad day. So getting there would be easy. I decided to leave the job I was working at, which was at the jail, and went into the abortion clinic one morning and I said, hey, are you guys hiring? A quick interview. And they said, can you start today? And I said, absolutely not. Like, I just got off a shift and I smell like jail. And they said, jail has a very distinct scent because it's closed in air conditioning. And they said, no, well, we'll offer you a $500 bonus. And I'm just like, I had already been a nurse for a long time, and not once was I offered an on the spot, you're leaving with $500 kind of a bonus, but it sounded good to me. And then she said, well, we need you to start immediately. Like, our nurse today called in, she had a sprained ankle. And so I said, show me the paperwork. And then that's when my relationship with the abortion clinic started. I really thought I was going to go in there and give back and help women until I realized what really happens behind the doors of an abortion clinic.
And what was the eye-opening moment for you?
I want to say you get little eye-opening moments from the very beginning. If I look back in retrospect, again, a $500 bonus. Every other reputable nursing job, you'll get a bonus, and it may be thousands, but you're going to get it after your 90-day probationary period is over because they want to make sure that you're a good match or that they're not giving you, $5,000 for no reason because you're not coming back, that you're invested. That's just the normal process of every reputable medical facility. Well, I got it on the spot. They had also given me a brand new phone that they ordered for me, and I received that the next day. Free lunch for every 24 procedures. You're going to get free lunch. If we did 12, It's iffy. Hurry up. Let's work towards the really good lunch. You get 24 procedures. Now you get your choice of Chinese food, or you can get Jamaican food because those were a little bit more expensive. So honestly, from the very beginning, from day one, if I look at it in retrospect with clear eyes, the coercion and everything starts the moment you walk in. But you overlook it. Again, I'm leaving with $500. I got free lunch and there's flexibility, and I work 5 minutes from home. It kind of like compensates and puts all the bad stuff to the side, right? So it's a bunch of those little moments that just add up eventually. So you're putting a patient in the back, one of the surgical techs, and I'm using those phrases lightly because nobody was certified in the abortion industry. The doctor and myself were the only two licensed practitioners in the entire building at any given moment. So one of the surgical techs or the hand holders is going in there with her cell phone, videotaping the patient because she knows her. And it was completely allowed. Like the owner said, if that's what we're not going to bother her. It's okay. Let's not create waves and get her in a bad mood. She can get nasty when she's in a bad mood. HIPAA. I mean, we broke every law every day that we could possibly break. So it's a bunch of those little moments that happen that just compile. And so there's that one day that you have to acknowledge you just can't carry this burden anymore. And that's when we have what we call our aha moments as ex-abortion workers. We all have that aha moment where we said, we just can't do this anymore. Like, I can't continue to lie to myself.
Noemi, were there ever days where you remember seeing a young woman go into the abortion facility without a parent and without what seemed to be parental consent or knowledge of what they were doing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We did not turn anyone away, So if we had the minor come in with her best friend and they skipped school and they are here and this is their situation, if we can get paid for the procedure, we overlooked everything. We overlooked not having parental consent. We overlooked no ID. I mean, there were a couple of times that we literally used Facebook profile pictures as an ID. Yes. And that
Wow.
came from the owner. That is a very clear day in my mind where I was like, listen, if she can't even produce not a simple ID, there's got to be a school ID, something. The child, for lack of a better word, right? Because I was working with the child at that moment. She did not have anything. And so the owner says, yeah, pull up Facebook. Every kid has Facebook. And I said, we cannot use Facebook. Like, my brother is a pilot for Korean Air on Facebook. There is absolutely no way that is a valid, that is. And she said, no, we're going to pull it up. And she had me pull it up and print it. And that's what is in that child's file.
Explain to us some of the dangers of that. People might not realize just how serious of a problem that is. What are the dangers of having children come in with no ID and the safety laws being completely disregarded? What are some of the big issues with that?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of problems, but I'm going to jump to the biggest one, which is follow through, which is if there is a problem with this procedure and we now have to contact somebody in case of an emergency, we don't even know who we're actually dealing with. Right? Because again, on Facebook, let's use this example. On Facebook, anybody can make up a name. You can put any kind of contact information. You may not even have any of your family members on Facebook. This child goes down because the child does not know her medical history, does not know that she's allergic to an anesthetic, let's just say. And if it's that one day we choose to give her anesthesia and then something happens and she declines immediately, who are we to contact? Not to mention that we have a minor on a table without parental consent and no adult in the waiting room to take accountability for her. And let's say the procedure went okay, right? And she made it through with flying colors. I'm tagging off a minor to another minor. How do I guarantee that she is going to get the care that she needs, that they are not really walking home, that they're not going to exert her? There's so many things that can happen. How do you know as a 13, 14-year-old child, 15, how much bleeding is too much? I can explain it. They just want to get out of the clinic and not pay attention. There isn't an accountability factor. There isn't anybody to legally, medically tag that person off. You cannot go to a dentist and get a simple surgical procedure, an extraction, without somebody to take you home. Yet we were aborting minors with anyone or no one in the waiting room for them.
Wow. How about this? Did the abortion facility ever do anything to verify whether or not a minor was being pressured, coerced, or, God forbid, human trafficked without a parent being involved?
Absolutely not. The entire time that I was there, which was for 4 years, it was about the money. And we as a staff, and obviously as a nurse, and I have been a nurse a long time, and we're trained, we're mandatory reporters, we're trained to pick up on these factors or on these nuances. And we had all of the above, all of those scenarios. We had traffickers bring young ladies in, and they had the right amount of money because they knew that money spoke. So if the procedure at that point was $500 to $800, and they said, I really need to have this done today. Here is 1,500. Guess what? We're doing it. We're doing it. We would have the uncle was another scenario. The uncle that brought in the niece because this happened, and he was the perpetrator because she verbalized it in the back room. But again, it was, we're going to lose the money, lose the procedure. We'd have to call the authorities. That was the biggest tap. You never called the cops. Like, we had people on the verge of death and we would not call 911, or we would not call the police department. We just did not want that associated with us. So we turned a blind eye to all those scenarios because it was about the money. If they had the right amount of money, and unfortunately, the funding resources, the National Abortion Federation, they don't have any guidelines. So again, at the moment I gave a date of birth, it didn't matter that it was a 13 or 14-year-old. They didn't say, was she properly credentialed? Is there an adult? No, they just sent us the money. So money talks.
If the parent doesn't have to be involved, who's looking out for the child? Who is protecting the child in the instance of perhaps a trafficker or someone who is abusive, maybe an abusive boyfriend who's forcing a young woman to go and get an abortion? If the parent isn't involved, who's protecting the child? Certainly not the abortion industry.
No, no one is. No one is protecting. And you brought up the trafficking issue. We know that girls who are trafficked are brought into abortion clinics, and the clinics should take pause and investigate and make sure. But these predators usually disguise themselves as fathers or other people. So, yeah, it's a big problem. And Virginia, of course, is an open border for everybody to come in and have their abortions. So we know teens are coming from other states without parental knowledge.
And how does this impact the relationship that children have with their parents?
Well, I can only speak from experience. At first, it was very uncomfortable, but as a mom, I loved her unconditionally. And I was sad about what she was going through. So I was really focused on her. But that's what we do. We focus on our children. And that's why parents need to be involved. They have the best interest. They're responsible financially, psychologically, obviously later, for the way they've been brought up. So it is a big problem. No one cares. No one cares better than a mom and dad.
And in many cases, Noemi, there's no law protecting these children. In many states, there is no parental consent requirement, and parents don't have to be involved. Legislators are told, all sorts of lies that the abortion industry will say, they try to fearmonger. What would you say to a lawmaker who is currently debating whether or not they want to pass a parental consent law to protect these children? What's your advice to the lawmakers?
I think the best question that I could give them is if this was somebody in your family, because unfortunately, a lot of people think it would not affect their family, right? But it can easily happen in the best of families or the worst of families. So I like to tell them, if this was a family member, if this was your niece, if this was your daughter or your niece's best friend, your granddaughter, would you want her to have a procedure that can end her life in a second without parental consent? Again, something as simple as a dental visit requires parental consent. I keep going back to the dentist because that's hey, I have to go to the dentist today. It's such an easy procedure, but you can't even get a dental cleaning without parental consent. Yet we're putting young ladies on a table in a non-sterile environment with non-sterile instruments, uncredentialed staff. No one is prepared for an emergency situation. The crash cart at an abortion center, it's ridiculous. It's most of the time expired. So there isn't any backup plan, just an emergency, get him out the door, let it happen someplace else. And so do we want that to happen to your granddaughter or to your niece or to your family member?
And Noemi, as you may have heard, a recent report says a Planned Parenthood kicked a woman out the front door and told her she needed to call 911 for herself. She's clearly in distress, and they didn't do anything for her. As you tell this story, I think to the legislators out there, if that was your daughter, if that was someone close to you, Noemi, if you had to come up with some sort of a devil's advocate position, can you think of any reason that someone would oppose parental consent laws when it relates to abortion?
Absolutely not. I want to say they say, oh, life saving, or if the perpetrator is within the family, there are other systems in place that are going to provide holistic care for these young ladies that have these unwanted pregnancies. Overlooking parental consent, allowing just anyone to walk in off the street for an abortion without the proper aftercare is horrendous. It's setting them up for death, pretty much. And just to piggyback off of the recent Planned Parenthood situation, that's been happening for so long, Victor. It's not new. During my tenure at the abortion clinic, during my horrible years, we would do it. We had a relationship with a local, for lack of a better word, motel/hotel. It was one of these, pay by the hour places. And there were a couple of women that I categorically just shipped out over there because they would charge us $39 for the day. That was the rate that we had worked out with them. And it was easier for us to take a $39 hit. It was $43.25 with taxes. That is how this is embedded in my mind. So $43.25, and we would send them out the door, and they would pretty much get sent there to bleed out or to either call 911 for themselves, to fend for themselves. I know categorically one woman did pass away at that hotel post our place. So post procedure. We did that very intentionally. I yelled out, I said, we're losing her. We have to call 911 right now. And what we did was call a taxi. Back then we didn't have Ubers and Lyfts. And so we called a taxi and they dropped her off at the lobby. Yeah. And I had a relationship with the manager at the time, and he called and he said, hey, this happened. And I said, well, you know what? Better there than here. That's what I said back then. I had to remove myself from the situation because saying anything other than that gave me accountability, and I wasn't ready for accountability back then.
I have to ask, Noemi, why are more of these abortion industries not being shut down? Why is the law not getting involved? When people hear about these horrific, quote-unquote, medical practices that are going on, you'd think SWAT teams would be knocking down their door, that there would be some sort of protection for the women who are having their lives ruined, the babies who are having their lives taken. Why don't you think these places have been shut down yet?
I think the major part of it is the hush-hush factor. Like, in case of an emergency, you would call 911 and then there would be action between that. 911 dispatches the police department and everybody arrives at the same time. So that doesn't happen. Again, we would never call 911. So to report something in the after fact or afterwards would mean a big investigation. And no one wants to step into an abortion clinic. The police department wouldn't want to step in there. ACA didn't want to step in there. Like, anybody who was mandated to come in would let us know ahead of time so that they could be there the minimal amount of time. Our surprise inspections were never a surprise. We literally would have, if they wanted 20 charts, we would provide 20 perfect charts. They'd come in and walk out, and that was it. No one in the entire world wanted to deal with what was happening behind closed door. And that gave us the leeway to present it to the world in whatever manner. We could spin it easily, right? We could spin it. No one dies here. This is women's health care. We're providing the best service. I am here giving back to my community. This is what we wanted the world to see, which is why a family member can't even go back and hold the patient's hand. Like, we make sure to provide distance between the patient and the family because we didn't want anybody who could testify or attest to what was really happening. Because I know if I'm keeping my sister company at a clinic and I see that they're using a dirty needle, I'm going to say, hey, where'd you get that from? And I'm going to advocate for her, right? So we didn't want any of that to happen. So the answer to that question, number one, is the world is just not informed. They're not privy to what really happened, which is why we speak out as ex-abortion workers, where we go through this long healing process to be able to speak out towards the atrocities that I committed. When I first quit, my favorite phrase was, they did this, they did that. I had this really big disconnect. I'm no longer in the building. So that's what they were doing. And so thank God for, and then there were none. And the healing retreats that we go through and how they can hold our hand and help me process and I had my I am they moment. And boy, I crashed, when I sat there and I just kept saying, yeah, this is what they did. And this is how they treated women. And then it just hit me like, wait, I am they. I was they for 4 years. And that accountability moment, something switched inside of me, and I said, I need to get better because the world needs to know what I did. So that's why we speak out, because until the world can fully understand the atrocities that are going on in these clinics, they're going to say okay with the facade that they're presenting.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit, Eileen, about some of the work that you do with Parents for Life.
So, Parents for Life serves as a collective voice for the public, educating the public and parents and legislators for the need of common sense legislation that protects teens and give the parents the right to know. I've had the opportunity and the privilege of speaking in front of legislative hearings throughout the country. I also had the honor of sharing my testimony on Capitol Hill on the Child Custody Protection Act, which made it a federal offense to transport minors across state lines. And I'm not even sure if that's being enforced. So there's a lot of work to be done. But right now, living in Virginia, my focus is in Virginia to make sure that we protect our teens and give parents the right to know, which we have a challenge this year because now we have a majority of pro-abort legislators in our capital.
Well, Eileen, as you share some of the work that you do with your organization, I have to wonder, how could anybody hearing your story, just looking at the facts, how could anybody ever disagree with you? If you had to play devil's advocate and you had to say, come up with some kind of a reason why you wouldn't support parental rights legislation, can you even come up with anything? To me, this seems like such, and you used the phrase, a common sense idea. This is common sense legislation which protects children. It ensures that parents have their rights respected. When you go and you travel your state or travel the country and you share this information, do you hear any pushback? What are the objections when you tell your story?
Well, the biggest objection is the abusive parent, which I just kind of put aside. And I say most parents are loving, as you are, to that legislator that I sit across the desk from. But his is asking good questions. When I sat with one legislator, I said, let me just ask you a question. Don't you even want to know if your granddaughter or your daughter is having an abortion? Despite your view on abortion, you as a parent, don't you want to know? Or do you want to wait until after and then have to pick up the pieces? Well, many of them just sit back in their chair and look at me and said, we never thought of that. So it's really important to get to the heart and the mind of people because they're not thinking. They're only, especially the other side, those who want to do harm to our children. All they're looking at is what they can do, how they're going to look. It's really money being supported by Planned Parenthood and all the other organizations. And then the other issue that comes up is the abortion pill. Our minors are getting the pill without us knowing, parents knowing. So I asked them that same question. You don't want the school to give your child an aspirin or Tylenol or whatever, and you have to sign a consent form when you send in a prescription that they have to take during school time, but you're going to allow that pill to be prescribed without your knowledge. And again, they sit back in their chair. They're not thinking. They're not thinking of the common sense issues that make sense. So I'm hoping I'm making a difference that way, changing hearts and minds.
Absolutely. And one of the other sides of this that people should be aware of is the chemical abortion certainly is very dangerous, but even a surgical abortion, this is not something that's done with a 0% complication rate. There is a real danger associated to these procedures, especially, I'm glad you bring up the chemical abortion. New data shows about 1 in 10 women end up with severe medical complications in the emergency room. They could become septic. They could literally die as a result of the abortion. And in the case of your daughter, there was the mention of surgery that needed to happen following it. So if parents aren't informed, if parents don't know, if they're never brought into the equation, and there is a child that's afraid, maybe they don't want to disappoint, the reasons that you mentioned earlier, and they hide that information from a parent, it could be lethal. And maybe that's something that people don't think about, especially in the age of the chemical abortion pill. And we've seen how prevalent it is for women to become septic, for there to be serious medical issues. If the parents aren't involved, again, I go back to the question, who is protecting that child?
Exactly. No one except the parent. You mentioned surgical abortion. If you have even your appendix taken out, if a child has an appendix taken out or has to have stitches on their hand, the parent has to sign a consent form before that procedure. So it doesn't make any sense. And again, just reminding legislators of that because I don't know why they're not thinking of it. They don't want to. So again, asking good questions has really helped get the attention of those who oppose parental consent and notification.
And how is it exactly that this ever even became the legal landscape that we're navigating? It would seem, I mean, as you mentioned, you have to sign off on basically everything as a parent. If your child is going to get an aspirin at school, you have to sign off on it. All of these different things, stitches, as you mentioned. Is there a special carve out in the law that says when it pertains to this particular an abortion, that's the time that you don't have to be involved? That seems crazy.
Yeah, it's not in there. It doesn't say it's not an exception. However, with this amendment, this reproduction right amendment, they're going to eliminate it at all. But again, I think basically it's state to state. It's not in the law. So states have to make their own law to protect parents and teens from the harm of abortion.
Well, Eileen, what would you say to a young woman who might be scared? Maybe she's in the shoes that your daughter was in, doesn't know what to do, maybe is depressed, and is thinking that abortion might be the way out. What would you say to her?
Well, I would say it's okay, take a step back, think about it, but you need to tell your parents because they're the ones who love you the most and will take care of you. But if they say, but my parents are abusive, well, this is what we do. We notify the authorities that this child may be in a bad situation and it needs to be investigated. But what we do in this country right now, if a child says, oh, I'm abused, I have to have an abortion, I can't tell my parents. So we're giving girls secret abortions and we're sending them back to the abuser. So I would say to the girl, let's take a step. If you are really in danger, I can help you if you want help. And that's what others need to do. If someone comes to them and says, I need this abortion, my mother will kill me. Well, she won't kill you, but she'll be disappointed maybe. But she's the best person. And your father is the best person who can care for you.
I mean, I would say run first and foremost. I that's what I want to say to everybody. I do have the distinct honor of now I also work with a pregnancy center. And so I do sit face to face with a lot of young ladies that are, facing the decision of an abortion, or some of them that have already decided. They come in here saying, I just need a sonogram, find out if I'm less than 6 weeks because I am aborting. I don't care what you tell me. So I have learned that this has to be a judgment-free zone. We have to sit in front of these young ladies and their families and their best friends without judgment. We have to work really hard to put our feelings up, because what I want to do is say, run, no, you're going to be hurt, but I can't because that can appear as judging. So I speak truth to them. I give them parts of my testimony and I let them know, right now you think that this is the best decision for you. Let's figure out. I tell them, give me 3 reasons why you want an abortion. And it very rarely stops at 3. They 5, 6, there's quite a few reasons. And they're very real reasons to them. I'm 15 and I live at home with my mom, and my mom is a devout Christian and she will throw me out. So I'm going to be pregnant and homeless and 15, and then I can't go to school. And so there's this domino effects of really good justifications for her abortion. So we have to be able to break that down for them and give them some viable options, give them some realistic options, give them alternatives, and give them truth, and do all of that in love without judgment. So it's kind of hard, but it's doable. It really is doable if we can open up our hearts to understand that they are broken. No one dealing with anything related to an abortion is not broken, not the worker, not the patient. It's very rare that a super healthy person walks in there for an abortion. And when I say healthy, I don't mean just physical. In their lives, they don't have complications or what we call the idiosyncrasies of life. So we have to acknowledge that this is very real to them, and their path is not an easy path. So we have to give them alternatives, and we have to do all of this in love without judgment.
Eileen and Noemi, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Victor, so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was amazing.
Well, this has been an eye-opening program for myself. I'm sure for you, the listener, it has been as well. I keep going back to that. Who is protecting the child? To think of the danger of a young woman getting a chemical abortion pill and no one else knows. We know that about 1 in 10 women who take these dangerous drugs will end up in the hospital for a severe complication, life-threatening at times complications, and similar when it comes to surgical abortions. There are so many complications. There are so many issues with that. And of course, we just have the obvious problem of a young child, a 14-year-old girl, a 15-year-old girl, clearly can't consent to these sorts of things. Parents have to be involved. We have to protect parental rights, because without the parent, no one is going to be looking out for the child. You, as a parent, you know what's best for your child, and you're going to look out for them better than anyone else in the entire world. There really is no argument to say that parents shouldn't have to be involved. They shouldn't be aware of what's potentially endangering the life of their children. And so the idea of secret abortions is just terrifying. If you want to learn more about this, we'll have resources and educational material on our website, lifeissues.org. I encourage you, share that with your friends, your family members, your church community. Ensure that parental rights are protected in your state. Again, you can find that at lifeissues.org. Be sure to tune in next week for another Straight Talk on Life Issues.